God, that was a little bit of a loud clap. I hope that I didn't break everyone's eardrums. If it was too loud, I'd probably edit it in the post editing process anyway. But either way, ladies and gentlemen, lads and ladettes, welcome to the Racquet with Racquet podcast. This is episode 12. Our last episode was esports I enjoy watching. This one will be about religion. We're going around the all the topics that I want to talk about individually in each podcast. Of course, each podcast is not going to be, the massive Joe Rogan experience, 2 hours, 3 hours long, because, of course, by yourself, it's a lot harder to reach that sort of extent, so it's not going to be the longest type of podcast, I guess. I'm not sort of at that, Jordan Peterson type lecture status or whatever, but so I can't exactly rant for that long. But, we're just trying to get all my points across, then we unpress the record button, then we upload it, and there we go. Because, it's been my goal for 2020 to at least have one podcast up a week, and, hopefully we can get into the hundreds, fellas, or become podcast boomers, or elders, or dead at that point. But, so this one's going to be a rather controversial topic, I think. But I think the way that I approach it is a diplomatic, sort of open view about religion. Now, there are a lot of ways to start about talking about religion, but for those who maybe are not in touch with religion, may not know what religion is, let me just get an official dictionary meaning of religion, so people can get a exclusive understanding of what religion is. The belief in and worship of superhuman controlling power, especially a personal god or gods. Now that pretty much stays true to most religions and how they operate. Of course, each religion has their own different systems, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later, but in general, most of them do have this one encompassing god or several that are in charge of the mortals, or basically came about of human creation, animals, the earth, etc. But first off, I suppose, what's my belief in religion personally? Now, I come from an agnostic sort of perspective. Now, for people who may not know what agnostic means, it is a person believes that nothing is known or can be known of the existence of nature, of the nature of God, right? That is the basic definition of agnostic. That is basically what I believe in, okay? So you're not discounting that something could exist. You're open to things. If you see proof, if you see evidence, you can sort of sway to other sides. But overall, you're in the middle. You're like, it could be there, it couldn't be there. No real way to know for sure, right? But yeah, so there you go. That's my personal stance. That's where I stand within the religious table, I should say. So I'm not exactly a hardcore atheist. I'm not exactly a hardcore Christian or Buddhist, or whatever you may, believe. Now, despite, I suppose, the more, sort of way we've been looking at religion recently, I feel like religion is still important to our society, but does have outdated concepts. So, of course, like, a lot of the importance religion derives from some of the morals that it encompasses and that it brings forth, to treat the others the way that you want to be treated. I haven't studied religion for quite a while, since I was like early high school, whatever. So I'm not going to be, spitting out quotes from like the Bible and stuff constantly, but I do get like the general gist, I was raised in a private school, both in primary and in high school in Australia. So we did learn religion majority of the time. It was not an elective. We had to relearn religion regardless. And sort of that transitioning period came for me personally into high school, and I feel like we are getting a little bit on a tangent at the moment. I was explaining that it does have important sort of reasons to hold within modern day society with the rules that it's set out, but I'm just sort of relating it back to me at the moment. The reason why I sort of strayed away from religion personally, from being Catholic initially, actually, because that is how I was raised and I was sent to these schooling systems, um, is because I suppose after developing and trying to think for myself, I was analyzing a lot more circumstances. This is a trait that is both a blessing and a curse for me. I'm a person who is quite analytical, and in scenarios where, you know, we're talking about life here, we're looking at an end goal. This is something that is very important. If you do participate, with your heart, with your love, with treating everyone wonderfully, doing absolutely nothing wrong, and the reward going up to heaven, it'd be fantastic, right? But we don't exactly know for sure. There was no hard evidence. There were stories in the Bible that just sort of seemed unrealistic to me. Whether it should be taken literally or whether it should be taken within meaning, of course, that's still a question that is still held within my brain. But I think logically that it is it's possible regarding like a lot of the modern sort of technologies that we've managed to advance through, and I'm going on a tangent once again. It can be likely in the fact that a lot of things are specifically designed for ways for them to function, that certain things have to be mathematically correct in order for things to function. But on the other hand, like, I like to give this analogy where if this is like the concept that I've personally created, it's called the infinity. I haven't actually named anything. I'm going to call it the infinity value, okay? So let's pretend, so you know how Yahtzee works. I believe this is how, I've actually never played Yahtzee, but like just throwing dice. So if I told you, now we're going to play a game, and I gave you a formula, I gave you a recipe to create something, and it required specific numbers and specific orders in order for that value or outcome to become apparent. So let's say, in order for the Earth to be constructed, you needed to roll 42s in a row. You needed to roll six, oh, actually, we'll just exaggerate it for the sake of, like, specifics of the Earth and how, like, certain things are created. Let's just say you had to roll to 6,722,000,000,000,000 times. Okay? And then it's continued up to 10 times with different numbers, and they had to do them in a certain order for things to function. Okay? So next would be, then you'd have to roll 600 or 600,000 times. Maybe you'd have to roll the 70 billion times in a row. Okay? Now, there's a quote, I forgot where it came from, where there are so many unlikely scenarios that they become unlikely. Sorry, there are so many unlikely scenarios that they become likely, right? Because there are so many of them that them being unlikely accounts them for being in a category where it can be possible for them to happen just because of the numbers of unlikely things. Now, the good thing about my theory is there is no specific time frame in where you need these variables to be achieved. So, if I want to roll 726 million times or whatever, even though that is extremely unlikely, you don't have a time period for that to be set, right? So my analogy is, if I were to give you a specific recipe where you were to throw dice and it needed to be landed on those amount of numbers at a very specific rate that would measure to be extremely unlikely, if time wasn't an issue, then it can be possible, right? That is a variable that is often accounted for, but in this scenario actually isn't accounted for. That's my, like, theory with how... I know it sounds really weird, guys. It's going to be called the Racquet Stupid Theory or something. But yeah, we'll get off that. Maybe I sound like a fucking like a priest coming out of Scientology or something. I don't want to look like that. But Either way, like my logical brain tried to develop something in order to sort of uh, counteract what was being told, because it sounded like tales. It sounded like fairy tales from when I was sort of evolving through age and wisdom, etc. And I think when you start developing through age, you once again sort of develop your individuality. And I'm a big advocate for individuality. I believe that someone shouldn't segregate themselves to one particular group. You can put yourselves in several different groups, but like you hold those values to you as an individual, right? Like you just yeah, that's the basic concept behind it. So I just tried to extract different information from different religions to see where the common ground was. And there are several different arguments as to why that it is a very sketchy subject to begin with in terms of why should you believe in religion. Like one of the main arguments of concern is, who's to say that, when you die, you won't be going to, you know, Buddha or Jesus or Hades. I mean, like I just use Hades as a comedic value. Obviously, like he's underground, god of the underworld, unless you're going to hell, whatever. But you get my drift, right? Who's to say you're not going to that specific god or this specific god? There are so many different religions; it's difficult to account for, right? Statistically, you can't just like follow the trend and go for the most popular one, because it doesn't exactly mean it's the most logical all the time. Even though typically a lot of Western culture was, founded on Christianity or whatever, right? So there are a bunch of different variables coming into this conversation. We've been talking 11 minutes already, and I feel like I've barely scratched the surface. We've gone off on several tangents. We've tried to make several different points, and we've just gone off topic some of the time. But we'll try and keep that, okay? This is a passionate subject. But once again, like someone who favors numbers, someone who has an analytical mind, I just thought that, I wasn't going to go the full route of being atheist. I just thought, for me, someone who is very diplomatic, believes in, talking things out, seeing where things go, very open to experiences, etc. I thought, very well a god could exist, and very well it could be something that none of us have even discovered. None of us even know about to begin with. Maybe one person in the world has that seed planted within them. Now I'm going within conspiracy. I don't actually believe this. I'm just creating hypotheticals. There are so many different variables and theories you could create that maybe something is out there. Okay, maybe something is out there. But look, we don't exactly know for sure, and that's what sort of stirs people on. To begin with, is that if you are to live life, and if you are to sort of have that hope, to have the willpower to power through, having something to believe in is something that could positively affect your life. It can negatively impact your life too, because sometimes, or maybe your prayers won't be answered or whatever. These are just examples. You're in a situation that you can't exactly dig yourself out with, and you're relying on a thing that could be very, 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 very unlikely to happen through coincidence, through circumstance, through magic. Who knows, man? Okay? But hope gives these people something to look forward to in life. Faith. If someone is having an awful time on earth, they're homeless, they have been ravaged their whole life. People punch them, people kick them every time they walk down the street. There is hope that, this is just a test, and when they are rewarded for their patience, they can have an endless life where they can be happy forever. That's a pretty good reward. If that holds true, a lot more people would be very nice, okay? And for people to believe that, and for people to follow those core values, it actually takes a lot of patience. Now, although I personally don't do it, I try not to be an asshole to people, because even though I'm not fundamentally I don't fundamentally follow like Catholic or Christianity. I do believe in a lot of the values that they do present, Wills, as so with other religions. You look at Carl Jung deriving from some of his not religious, but like his sort of philosophical endeavors that sort of dip into the sector of religion or morality and such that derive from certain places. So there are a lot of sort of sectors we can dive into, but at the end of the day, my general rule when it comes to religion is that I don't care what you believe in, so long as you don't force it upon me, then I'm happy. Because there are people, and this isn't everyone, there are extremists in every single sector of whatever we do, where you announce your religion to them after them asking, like a pest, and then they say that, oh my, you're not Christian. Oh, if you don't be Christian soon, you're going to be condemned to hell and you're going to rot, and you're going to have guinea pigs shoved through your butt cheeks. I'm like, dude, wait, can you settle down for a second, please? Just let me believe in what I want to believe. I understand from your point of view it may look like you're helping, but it seems overly intrusive to do that, and it comes off as rude. And that is one of the things that I feel like is a concept that needs to stop, because in the olden days that would have been probably perfectly acceptable for that to happen, where maybe they wouldn't have known as much information as we did today, and they were trying to sort of, given these circumstances that were catastrophic, like the Black Plague, people wanted to act the best out of what a crisis was, so they can get rewarded in the future, right? Like these basic scenarios where they're trying to scour for hope. It's understandable. But once again, religion does have its flaws. And we'll talk about that right now, actually. I mean, let's look at one of the main ones, same-sex marriage, or same-sex in general. It is generally frowned upon a lot of religious communities for that to happen. Recording this on the 28th of February, and I think on the weekend Mardi Gras is happening as well. So, funnily enough, I mentioned this. So, people going to Mardi Gras, have a good time, and enjoy yourselves, be proud. So, either way, my general feeling on this is that love is love, and with this specific boundary, it isn't bad. Now, I have talked to friends in the past, someone who has not supported the gay community, and has used this argument, which theoretically it is a fair argument, but it does have rules and boundaries due to the societal system we've set up. So here's an example. So my friend would say, okay, if you're using the argument love is love, then why can't we use that concept to other assets of life that we would deem wrong? So let's say love is love, why couldn't we use that same sort of rule for pedophilia? Why couldn't we use that same sort of rule for, a human relationship between animals? Now, there is reasons towards this. One, because, there's legislation and rules in place that, these things are illegal. And if you do these things, because they have, since the start of time, or since the start of modern civilization, we have deemed these things to be wrong. I guess the gay thing was deemed to be wrong back then, but it's difficult to explain, but it's morally wrong on several sort of different levels. Where an age gap is very important, or has been very important for sort of parties to connect with each other, and they can consensually understand each other. People may use the example of what about sugar daddies? You're having a 18-year-old chill with a 50-year-old, but the difference is 18 is legal and consensual. She elects to go into that relationship. They consensually meet and want to be together. Okay, whether it be for money, whether it be for love, I don't personally agree with that concept, but it does fundamentally make sense. But there's a difference between them or a party being young, where they don't understand a lot of the concepts of life. Their cerebral cortex isn't developed enough for them to understand this, and they shouldn't be subjected to sex or sexual things at this age in the first place. And they're interacting with someone who is much older, that is like a fundamentally wrong thing to do, right? And the same with animals, like they're not even the same like race or species, whatever. Like it's just you can't gauge whether they would like you back anyway. There's no logic towards that. Like once you dig in deeper, and once again, setting the fact that there are rules and legislations to say these things are wrong backs up that statement, right? Um, but for the gay marriage sort of argument, that's sort of been debunked from what I just said there. There is a better argument that I can probably develop, and I've said it in the past, but honestly I forgot. But that's just basic stuff right there. As I said, I believe in gay marriage. I have people, friends that are gay, and they feel sort of peer pressured by society, and they are sort of pigeonholed and relegated when they attempt to act sort of gay in public or whatever. And one of the main reasons towards that is religion. And I can sort of understand the main logic of, okay, if you're gay, you can't get married in the church because it's against the church's belief. If that church is specifically within a religious sort of, well, I guess churches would be religious because it's a church. I can understand that, okay? You're respecting the rules of the church, even though I think they're wrong. That is technically the rules that they've set by, even though they're outdated. Like, you can still get married somewhere else, hopefully, okay? Even though I personally don't like that, that's the sort of rules that they've set themselves. But yeah, that's just the way of the land, I suppose. But sort of steering away from those, looking at other aspects of, religious writing and how it's devolved in a sort of sense, which sort of comes back to an issue of religion. Now, I don't want to sort of brush this canvas broadly with this statement, but I think it's very ridiculous in this modern age where you have someone who is dressed up and doesn't have permission to be in a relationship for the rest of their life, devoting their whole life to God. I feel like that's a very weird sort of ritual to conduct yourself with. And it is one of the reasons why, I'm not going to say often, but we do see circumstances, one of the main sort of suspects that succumb to or engage in pedophilia have been priests because they have no sex life, right? I know this is a really touchy subject to talk about. I didn't mean it in that way. This is a really sensitive subject to talk about, but for me, it's important to discuss, right? If they didn't have this rule in place, then I feel like a lot of the younger people would feel a lot more comfortable in attending church, because it is a problem that needs to be addressed. Once again, I'm not claiming every single priest does this. I'm not even claiming half the priests do this or a quarter. It probably is a very minor thing, but when it does happen, it scars a lot of the kids, and it is a stereotype for a reason, because it derives from somewhere, and it has happened on several occasions for that to be apparent. So yeah, that rule should very much be abolished. It seems rather sort of sexist as well. We don't want to dive into that too much because of political reasons. I don't really like delving into political stuff on this channel. For obvious reasons, I like to keep myself open. I don't want to side myself towards anything in particular. But, those are just a couple examples. But either way, a lot of our morals, a lot of our goodwill, our fundamental sort of aspects of life have derived from religion, and has helped shape what modern day society looks like. In fact, it has helped shape legislation that has been put in place to this very day, whether it be for the good or the bad. A lot of it has been for the good. Stealing, for, I guess cheating isn't technically a rule, but violence or whatever, derived from the commandments. These rules that have been transferred from across the ages, whether they actually happened or not, still the same sort. They derived from somewhere, and they derived from someone writing a book and that text being contextualized today, a lot of what was written in there, the concepts apply in modern day society and have shaped the rules that we do have in place. Excuse me, I'm just gonna put the fan on a little bit higher. It's getting hot in here. But either way, once again, I'm very respectful towards religious people. As I said, I don't exactly agree with all of their values, and I disagree with some of their things. I agree with a lot of their things too. Just so long as they don't sort of push forward their agenda on me, I'm completely fine. You have these people as well, once again on the extremist side, that claim every couple of years, every year, oh, the world's going to end. I've received a whisper from God. He's told me the whole world is going to end. Most of these people are like crack addicts or whatever. They're on something at least. And they bring a bad name to the wider sort of religious community, I feel. And this is something that we need to stop doing in general, which is why I sort of structurally worded the priest thing in a way to make sure that I don't cover every single priest when I say it, in that you can't like stereotype or generalize everything towards one particular category, target, race, stereo, or like, gender, whatever. You can't sort of do that, okay? Unless like the statistics are overwhelmingly positive in that sort of category, then I guess you can sort of make an argument, even though it could be offensive. But either way, we've gone on a really big tangent, guys. This isn't exactly going to be the longest podcast episode, but I do think it's important to sort of get out there. And if the reason why I'm sort of agnostic is because I'm open to believe certain things. Maybe if I do receive a miracle in my life, in like 20 years' time, I'll like turn back to Catholic. Or if nothing happens throughout my life, I'll just sort of remain forever a wandering, a wandering outcast. Well, not a wandering outcast. It's like an explorer, I suppose. Just sort of journeying through. But I really sort of do enjoy talking about religion and like getting everyone's thoughts on it, because everyone has their different take on religion, and at the end of the day, you can't exactly bubble up every single religion into a bracket because a lot of their beliefs are very different. The reason why I sort of have been talking more towards the Christianity or Catholic side is because I was personally raised in that situation, and I know a lot more about that than other religion. I've done yoga, but that is like, it derives from I believe, guys. Correct me if I'm wrong here. It derives from like, Buddhist techniques, like understanding how the body works and stuff like that. Which comes from Buddhism. I think I maybe have read it somewhere, and it was in my mind for a reason. Maybe I'm just completely wrong in that regards, and you guys can talk about that in the future and absolutely roast me. But yeah, look, it's fantastic that we can be accepting of this. We do have people who are accepting of this, but obviously there are outdated concepts where in some Middle Eastern countries, because of culture and how their sort of books are scribed, some women are treated very unfairly, being stoned for reasons, and they can only sort of do things in a particular way, restricting how they operate within society, not progressing. But overall, I feel like it can, if if written properly, can have a positive impact. I don't really want to talk about too much more. I've got dinner coming up soon as well, so we'll get that sorted out. Grab some sausage sizzles, fellas, and we'll be on our way. So make sure you guys have a wonderful day, evening, morning, wherever you may hail from, and take care of yourselves. I believe one episode should air every Friday or Saturday, probably Saturday morning. Because I like to render overnight, because it is a podcast type format, so I render it in 1080p 60 fps, which for a podcast, hey, pretty good, guys. I'm giving you guys more frames, I'm giving you better pixels. Come on, I do a lot of stuff for you, And I am doing a lot of these podcasts by myself just because I believe that'll be in the more consistent way. I don't want to like wait and someone doesn't turn up and I have to do an episode on like sort of a short notice or whatever, because usually I do formulate these sort of ideas a little bit before the podcast starts, so I can generally get some points down of what I can talk to. But most of it is off the cuff anyway. So anyway, have a wonderful time, you fellas. Thank you for watching the podcast. Take care, everyone. Goodbye.